enjoyable and inspiring as we showcase regular people from the city of Detroit who are doing great things and really making a difference in our city, the city of Detroit. Good morning, family. How are you? This is Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson, and you're listening to us on Gospel 1440 WMKM Reborn. Okay, so let's have a conversation in regards to our Detroit public schools. Phone number here, 313-871-6094 or 313-871-6095. I'm hoping that we will have a special guest, Miss Simone Lightfoot. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been reading to you about what she has had to say in regards to a committee that she belonged to trying to help Detroit public school children. And I never got through her letter of resignation, but I do believe she is on the line. And so, good morning, Simone.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I am so well. Simone, would you please, because we only have a half hour, would you please introduce yourself to our family? Let them know just how phenomenal of a woman of God, a woman of integrity. See, this just excites me. I asked you to introduce yourself, but I think I can't help but to let everyone know just who is on the phone, and we're going to have a conversation in regards to Detroit public schools. I'm excited that you're on with us because you have taken a stand, and I don't know, girl, if you just know just what you have done for not only Detroit public school students, but for people of color. And a woman who has, in my opinion, has made it, but she knows how to reach back, and she has not forgotten. See, some people can talk a good talk and can look just like us, but then when they're close to what they believe to be the dollars, they forget what the mission of this life is. And like I've said over and over, I truly believe that we are on earth for only one purpose only, and that is to serve God. And by serving God, you serve people, and you take a stand. You take stands. When you know wrong is wrong, you don't ignore it, because you will have to answer. I want to introduce you to a phenomenal Simone Lightfoot. Thank you, Simone.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's so nice and so humbling. I appreciate you. That's the best words I can come up with right at this moment. Thank you so much for that. This work is a yeoman's work, public education. It's a heavy lift right now. We're under a system that is destroying, if you will, democracy as we know it. And so I was sharing earlier, there's a time really to be very diplomatic. There's a time to have conversations and have task force and committees. And then there's times to fight. I'm a military-trained U.S. Air Force veteran, and I know that when you are under fire, you have to first take cover, and then you have to get busy firing back. There's plenty of time to assess later. We called it in the military the debrief, where you get back and you figure out what happened and when and where. But that is not what you do when you're under fire. You have to fight back. And we, in Michigan, as it relates to public education, are definitely feeling the brunt of that fire.
So are you saying that we are under fire?
No question. No question. Public education as a whole, along with democracy. See, I think, in my view, democracy is what's under fire.
Yes.
And a byproduct of that is labor, public teachers, police officers, their pensions. Those things are a byproduct. Public education is another. Our country doesn't have the richest history of educating black children That has not been the priority of our country as a whole. We've had separate entities, churches, faith communities, organizations that have made it their priority with our HBCUs and others. But that has not been the desire necessarily and the best outcome, if you will, from our governance in our country. And so we have to be extra scrutinizing when it comes to the government and the way in which they operate, and anyone who deals or works around public education is so important. How we do it in Detroit is ground zero for the rest of the nation. How we do it here matters, and it will permeate up 94 into the Ann Arbor Public Schools, where I happen to sit on the school board, all the way over into Chicago, where we have a hotly contested mayoral race based on what has happened with closing over 50 schools in one fell swoop, all the way over into Milwaukee, and you keep on over into the Great Lakes region and over into the West Coast. If we get it right in Detroit, we can export good policy into the world, and unlike what we're doing at this point.
You were on a committee of maybe about 30 people from all over Michigan. Did you have some doctors, some attorneys? I understand that you had some politicians, some pastors. But my question was, were there any parents on that committee?
That's a good question. I was on the subcommittee. There were about 6 to 7 subcommittees. There was the large overall committee, which was headed by all the names that we see on the cover of the Choices Hours report, or the second page anyway.
What was the umbrella of this committee? Tell the family, what was the umbrella?
Well, when you say the umbrella, we had the steering committee itself, and that's where you had the large number of very high-profile, very named and regarded. All of them, though, I think I shouldn't say that, because all of the folks, all the committees, the names, when you look through, were folks that we know, folks we've worked with for years, folks that we regard in education and nonprofit and in faith and in some of the financial institutions. So the steering committee was the large overall committee. And then I was a part of what was called the policy committee, which was one of the 6 to 7 subcommittees. And we had probably about 20-ish or so people on that committee. And our role was specifically for the policy side of it. So and the way it was structured, the way it was supposed to work is as those policies came from out of the other committees, they would come to us and we would get to look at those and vet them. My committee consisted of folk like myself who really are policy wonks, people who read through and really like digging into the difference between may and must, shall and must. Those are what we did. We had state reps that were on there, former as well as current, I think. We had some school board members. We had definitely superintendents of ISDs. We had state school board members. And so we, again, were those folk who had been quite comfortable and experienced delving into wording and verbiage. And so that was our role to, as the policies flowed, we would look at it, give our markups, and then sort of send it back through the pipeline.
When you say send it back through the pipeline, where at the top of that pipeline did it go? Or was it supposed to go?
There you go, supposed to go. I can only speak to where it was supposed to go, and it was supposed to go back through the system. Now, I'm not clear if it was supposed to go back to every single subcommittee that had sent policy or if it went directly to the steering committee. But ideally, ultimately, it was to reach the steering committee as they made these sort of final recommendations. That was supposed to be the flow of it.
What was the whole purpose of the steering committee?
I really can't speak to that. I wasn't a part of the steering committee, that big head group. And we really were quite siloed, if you will. We met and we did our thing, so we didn't meet with other committees during my time on the policy committee. We didn't really conversate with other committees, so I can't speak firmly what it was they did, how they did it, why they did it, that type of thing. I wish I could, but I don't know the answer to that.
Who was the initiator then? Let me ask you that, if you know. Who was the initiator of getting all these groups together? What was the whole purpose? Was it because the children of the city of Detroit were being failed?
Well, again, I'm speculating because I wasn't privy to that part of it. I know we were called when we came to the table as the policy committee. We were told very clearly that we need you here. We need your perspective on this thing called policy. So as the policy flows, we need you to look at it, review it, and add your views. So we were told very specifically what our job was to be, if you will. And that is what I was most challenged by, in the sense that we had 11 slated meetings. By meeting 8, we still had not received policy. And so I grew quite frustrated. I stayed frustrated from meeting 1 because I was concerned about the way in which the meetings were going. In my mind, which is why I resigned, and I laid that out in my letter, the very smart people that were in the room, as suggestions were being made, the response for me was very clear that it was to support EAA, it was to support funded schools, so I should say profit-driven schools, and then it was about making sure that the governor's sort of pet projects, or the things that he liked best, continued to stay in place, and that bothered me from the first meeting when we were talking about, like, for instance, EAA. My sentiment was that EAA had to go. The data reflected. We have a governor who says he's data-driven. My challenge is it seems to be selective data-driven. It's not, because if it's data-driven, it's been a very established case made that EAA is failing. And so for us to even talk about it remaining around was problematic for me at the very beginning. When you had these folks putting forth ideas and thoughts, we were responded to, well, let's just keep it broad. Let's not dig down deep and make very specific recommendations. That was a challenge for me because the folk in the room were the folk who were frontline and firing line folk. They were the ones who you'd want making very specific recommendations. But I held in there, and we went to about meeting 8. And at that point, I realized we had not seen any policy yet. We only had a couple meetings left, and I did not see where we would be effective at lending our voices and our perspective and our expertise, given the time frame that was remaining. And so I decided that I needed to leave. It wasn't working, and it wasn't seeming to benefit the children. But the ultimate, when I got the report yesterday, and I've been poring over it, some of the recommendations, I'm very happy to see, for instance, that there is the desire to move away from the EAA. My challenge is it isn't ending the EAA, it's moving the EAA under the State Reform Office. And so when I look at media reports, they say, well, the report says that they're going to end EAA. That's not the way I read it. The way I read it is they're going to end the relationship, for instance, with Eastern Michigan University, which was the conduit by which was used to empower the EAA. So they'll end that relationship, but then just move the EAA under the State Reform Office, and that's the difference. So it's a difference in ending it versus moving it. That's a challenge for me.
These people are too funny, and they take us for a joke. You're not saying this, but I will say this. This governor thinks he can do what he wants to do, when he wants to do, how he wants to do. And I just wish the people would really wake up. But there are people who are waking up, so I'm pleased about that.
Yeah, yes. He has, though. I mean, you and I say, like, he thinks he can do what he wants to do. Well, he really can. He has.
Mm-hmm.
Even before the report was finished. I tell people, don't put too much stake in the report itself and not the work. I want to commend the folk who showed up, who drove. It was free work that, they weren't being compensated at any level that I'm aware of. They really put their ideas and thoughts, and they had more, I think, hope and more, I'm lost for words, but they had more of a thought that this would amount to something. And all while they were doing that, the governor's education train had already left the station.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge for me is that even if we loved everything in the report, he's made it very clear that he is about his business. The way that the state school board is now being attacked and being threatened to be moved, and the purview of all the things that it had been responsible for is now in question. That's just amazing to me. And to hear people continue to say, well, let's just hope, let's just trust. I don't quite work that way.
That's right.
On the evidence presented and the pattern and the history. And when you demonstrate who you are the first time to me, I believe you.
I believe you. See, that's why I had to have you on this show. I'm hoping and I'm praying that there are parents, people who are not parents, people who are just concerned, because it doesn't matter whether or not you have a child in the public education or in the system, or it doesn't matter, because what happens to Johnny or Susie is happening to you whether or not you want to believe it or not. So when I read this article, what was that, the coalition recommendations, it may seem like there are some good things to it, and there are. But once I saw Mike Duggan's name on it, it turned me totally off. Because once I saw that, I knew that this was a program created by the governor of this great state of Michigan. You don't have to say it. I'll say it.
I didn't quite I'm frustrated with any sort of a notion that mayoral control or mayoral oversight. I do believe that the mayor should definitely lend his perspective. He should lend his vision for the city, and so that we are shaping education to align in many ways with that vision. That's perfectly fine. But
yeah,
when we look historically at Detroit Public Schools being under the purview of the city, I often say that when the city, back in that time, when the city sneezed, the district caught pneumonia. We did not have people in the district that were in the city governance that were educators.
Say that one more time, please.
Well, we didn't. We did, and we don't today. We don't have a plethora of educators populating the mayor's staff, the mayor's team. And so when you're talking about a city already coming out of bankruptcy, already trying to figure out how to get the new lights to work, let alone get to fixing the old lights, already dealing with transportation challenges and all the other challenges. I mean, your audience, WMKM audience, knows exactly the challenges facing Detroit. We need folks in our city governance focused on city matters. Education matters, in my view, should be left to educators. I'm also troubled that we have all these reinventions of wheels going on. I was looking at the report, and there's just additional layers of governance structure. And my mind is, we knew the Detroit Public Schools needed some fixing. Why not just get busy fixing that and lending the resources and the capacity to that?
Well, you know what that's all about, right?
Well, for me, it has to be profit-driven. I'm not seeing any other evidence of anything else that it could be, because the data clearly shows what's going on is not working.
Listen, Simone, if the city of Detroit is on the rebound to become the new city of Detroit, and downtown, uptown, midtown, all those areas are being focused in and being created to be this new city of Detroit. The new citizens of Detroit, the returning citizens of Detroit, need somewhere to place their children in school. Most people, most intelligent people, will not move into a community, especially if they have children, if there is not an intact public school system.
No question.
Okay? Nope. So it only makes sense that this coalition, with the governor's blessings, and I hope no one is fooled by anything less than that, by the governor's blessing, to make Mike Duggan, who is the mayor of Detroit, the overseer of Detroit public education, not for its current residents, but, and this is only my opinion, but in order to bring education to where it should be, but for new residents.
That's a challenge. When you're talking about centralizing operations, I always look at rules, and it's interesting to say, for instance, we're going to return to a elected school board. Well, we have an elected school board. They're just not empowered.
Right.
So if it doesn't say elected and empowered, or elected and fully empowered school board, then what do you have? We talk about in the report, we talked about caring teachers. Well, I'd first choose a qualified teacher, a credentialed teacher, and third, I'd say caring. I think so those words matter. We want caring teachers. Well, we want more than caring. We want them to be certified. We want them to be experienced. We want them to be as top-notch as we can get them.
You know what, Simone, and I love many of the people who are currently on that Detroit Board of Education. But between you and me, although I love them, we need to do something to rearrange or to make people qualified to be on that board, because everybody on that board, in my opinion, are not qualified, not to make policy that needs to be made for our children in the city of Detroit. I'm sorry. And I could name some of them, but I won't.
You know what? I'm with you on the concern. But what I'm challenged with is just because you don't like who I elect, you should not have the permission to change the structure. You should not have the permission to usurp my right. If I pick a dog, if he's on the ballot and I vote for that dog, you shouldn't be able to come in.
And I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. All I'm simply suggesting, though, is that in order for a person to run for board, because our education is so important, in order for us to run for Board of Education, I think we need to rework the ordinance or the laws to have conditions in order for a person to run for or to be on that board.
Well,
I don't want a dog to be on the board or just my favorite person, so that favorite person is going to be on that board. Not when it comes to the education of our children.
I'm with you. I just think, though, I'm with you. I think, though, any changes that we made, any caveats, any requirements, they need to be statewide.
Absolutely.
For Ann Arbor, it should be good for Detroit. So
absolutely.
And let me be clear, too. Detroit has had y'all had lawyers, doctors. Y'all haven't had, just any old body on your school board in the past. I think I'm a voter education, registration, mobilization, and voter protection kind of girl. That's what I've done for the Detroit NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we have to put the infrastructure in place to make sure we're doing that we are educating voters, we're vetting candidates, we are doing the behind-the-scenes.
Absolutely.
To make sure certain folks aren't running because we know they're not qualified to run. That's family business in my mind. That's the business of the electorate and the people who influence the electorate. I do have a challenge if we say, well, we don't like who Detroit picked for mayor. We don't like who Detroit picked for city council, so we're going to take their right to be able to pick away. That's troubling. If you say you have to be a PhD to run for public schools in Detroit, you should have to be a PhD to run for every school district in this state.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That I think, and the challenge I would have with that is that many of us in other districts, Bloomfield, Novi, you name them, those that are considered, quote, more successful districts, we don't have all PhDs. We don't have even all people who graduated college. Yet we still have high-functioning, high-benefiting districts. And so there has to be a way to get it done in Detroit without feeling like we have to always destroy rights for the folk in the city.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm with you. We do have a mighty work to do to select not only school board candidates, we have some state rep candidates.
Oh, yeah.
We have some state senate candidates and office holders because I'm concerned about the level of muteness or quietness across the board as it relates to, again, labor. To watch what is going on with labor, the way that we destroy teachers and their retirement, and then say that, okay, some young 21-year-old can come right on in and teach this urban center class and be...
Let me ask you this, Simone, let me ask you this. What is going on in the city of Detroit right now, do you think the same thing would happen to Ann Arbor or the children in Ann Arbor?
Oh, please. I do not. As a matter of fact, I do not, which is why, though, I feel like we have an extra added responsibility to say something because we do have the capacity. We do have the money. We do have the means. We do have the commitment to public education. We will bond ourselves in Ann Arbor, and Detroit does, too. I don't want to take anything from Detroit. When you put it on the ballot for Detroit and their schools, they vote to take care of their schools.
Mm-hmm.
We in Ann Arbor, education is our business in this town. It's what we do. And so...
In Ann Arbor.
in Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if, I don't want to say bring it, but I think that this is the community that you would want it to come to, because we would have the wherewithal to fight back with all of our might, all of our privilege, to make a difference. And so, no. And that's the kind of thing that I think any report or any recommendation should be vetted through the lens of, would it go through Ann Arbor? Would it go through Bloomfield?
That's right.
Would it go through Novi? And if the answer is no, then it should be no for Detroit.
That's right. Simone, we are coming to the end of this show, girl. You've got to come back on. I have, and I hope that this family has enjoyed listening to you. You are very succinct. I want you all to check out Simone Lightfoot. The name sounds just the way, the name is spelled just the way it sounds. Simone, thank you. Thank you so very much for being the beacon of light, for being my hero. I really appreciate you, Simone Lightfoot.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you all. You have been listening to Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson on Gospel 1440 WMKM Reborn, and with our very special guest, Simone Lightfoot. God bless you all. I will see you next Tuesday.
Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. They're the ones who's coming up, and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. They're the ones who's coming up, and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can.